It's a heart behind bars, and it signifies the fact that the people we love are incarcerated, and we're doing our time with them. And I say, and I've said since my husband was arrested, that I was doing my time on the outside.
New York ranks 39th in the United States, the country with the highest incarceration rate in the world, with 2.3 million people currently serving time. The media gives a distorted view of prison life, filled with violence, power struggles, and scandalous relationships. But we forget about the families the incarcerated leave behind. There are 120,000 mothers and 1.1 million fathers behind bars. 2.7 million children have a parent in prison, 105,000 of them in New York. Each of these families endure their own struggles as they live with their hearts behind bars.
So what I used to do after a visit, I put my children in a double stroller, and one of my colleagues, my teacher friends, would come with me, and we would walk the children back and forth in front of the jail. And he would be able to look out. Usually one of the guards would allow him to look out onto the street, so at least he could see the girls, though they could not see him. My husband was a very kind, generous man, except when he was drinking. He had a mental illness which he masked with alcohol. And when he drank, he became violent. So my husband can be described as a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. There were two sides of him. One side I loved dearly, the other side I feared.
Barbara's husband, Gene Allen, returned home one night with his father after a night of drinking. The two began an argument that turned deadly when Gene grabbed a shotgun from the closet and killed his father.
He called me one evening and told me that he had just shot and killed his father in my kitchen. Of course, I didn't believe him. He was very manipulative, and I knew that he wanted me to come back home. And I assumed that this was his way of getting me there, pushing my buttons, kind of. But he did put the phone down to his father's mouth, and I could hear the gurgling, the death rattle.
Barbara could not have predicted that Gene would be arrested and sent to prison. But when he was incarcerated, it drastically changed her life.
Oh, in every way you could possibly imagine. Financially, socially, emotionally. There was not a bit of my life that remained the same except my job. Very fortunately, I was a school teacher. I had a career, as most women who are brought into this, they don't, but I was fortunate, and I had two very supportive parents. So I was able to maintain some kind of a semblance of life at this point. But my life revolved around trying to get him help.
Barbara made sure she and her daughters visited her husband as much as possible. Prison visitations are not as colorful or as lenient as they appear on screen.
Yes, it was. It was, as I said, through a telephone and the screen. I had to stand on my tiptoe, and there were people surrounding us. There was never any privacy, and we were sure, and it's probably true, that we were being recorded. And so you're afraid of what you're saying.
Gene spent a year in the Nassau County Jail waiting his deposition.
They were not allowed to visit at the jail. In those days, there were no visiting for children under 16. No telephone contact. This goes back to 1966.
Was when he was incarcerated.
Yeah, December of 1966 he committed the crime. So the children lost total contact with their father. Now, Gene was a good father most of the time. You know, as long as he was drinking, and when he was drinking, I really did protect my children from him. So their remembrance of him was a good person in their life, and now they had absolutely no contact with him.
One evening, during the first year of Gene's imprisonment, Barbara was watching an episode of The David Susskind Show and was first introduced to the Fortune Society. The founder of this organization is former theater producer David Rothenberg. While working on the play Fortune in Men's Eyes, Rothenberg took a trip to Rikers Island that drastically changed his career focus. The Fortune Society is a 48-year-old organization dedicated to aiding former incarcerated persons in becoming positive, contributing members in society.
So we began as an advocacy organization. 4 of the men went on television, which was very brave for them in 1968. I received hundreds and hundreds of letters, and one of them was from a woman in Long Island who said, I'm doing my time on the outside. My husband, Gene Allen, was incarcerated, and I, Barbara Allen, she said in the letter she has 2 little girls, and she feels all alone. And I called, it was a whole, you get lots and lots of mails, but this one cried for a response immediately. And I called her and I said, we have a speaking engagement in Long Island. She said, can I come into the city and meet you? And I said, we're going to be in Long Island tomorrow. And a group of us were out there to speak, and she introduced herself to us.
And anytime any family member would call the Fortune Society looking for help for the incarcerated person, they would give them my phone number. So that was really part of one area of how I started working with families. And then when I went to the visiting rooms to visit, I reached out to the families in the visiting areas for me, because I felt so alone. I felt as if there was no one I could really talk to who would understand what I'm feeling and what I'm going through, except the woman standing next to me in the visiting room. So I met people both in the county jail and in prisons. And so I was working with the Fortune Society, just talking to people over the phone, and I met 2 women. One had a husband in federal prison, and she was going to Al-Anon, which is an organization for the families of people who have alcohol problems. And she said to me, why don't we start a group for people in our position, kind of like Al-Anon? And then I met another woman at an event who was a social worker, and she asked me if anything is being done to help the families of people incarcerated. And I said, no, but I'd like you to meet Joan. I can't do it because I'm involved with the Fortune Society, and I can't leave them. But maybe the 2 of you would like to meet and start something. So anyway, they met in my house, and of course I never left them. And that's how we started Prison Families Anonymous. So I did it selfishly. I did it because I did not want to be alone. And I thought if I felt that way, I'm sure everybody else out there did. I didn't want anyone to have to go through that by themselves. At the very last minute, he decided to cop a plea, to make a plea deal, because he didn't want everybody to have to go through a trial. So they sentenced him to 2.5 to 7 years. He did his initial upstate stint at Sing Sing prison, the notorious Sing Sing prison. Back then, everyone who was arrested, who was sentenced, convicted, went to Sing Sing because it was reception. So there they had contact visits. You could bring the children, and the children could sit on his lap, and there was just a table separating us. And so I started bringing my children for visits. It wasn't bad, of course. It was a horrible ride in the experience itself, because Sing Sing is up a hill, and you brought a packages. You're allowed 35-pound package a month, and you had to drag it up the hill, and the children, and God help you if you veered from the path. You'd hear booming voice from the guard tower yelling at you. But the children were allowed to see their father, and that was good. And then, after reception, he was sent to Greenhaven prison. Greenhaven had a visiting area with a screen from the ceiling to the table. And the only contact you could have with him is fingertip contact. And I made a decision I was not going to bring my children there. I did not want my children to see their father in a cage, because literally that's what it was. He was in a cage. So the business with the children stopped at that point.
How was this day?
It was one of the very first picnics. They have them now with all the prisons, but where you could go to visit and go outside. And this family day. And the inmates cooked. And you could sit and be almost normal.
What do you think that day is like for most families, or at least what was it for you guys?
Oh, it was wonderful. We were together like a family, and he could hug his daughters. And I guess it was a lot of trepidation. You know, when I came home from visits, when I left the prison, I always carpooled going up because I met all these families. And going up, we'd all be very animated and talk about, when we stopped on the way of the diner or something, if they only knew who we were, you know, if they only knew where we were going. But coming home, you could hear a pin drop. The ride was so silent. And I guess that's what kept me going with those two girls.
What did you tell your children when they were growing up in a world that generally condemns people for what they do?
I explained to my children as they were getting a little bit older that Daddy did something wrong. He made a terrible mistake, and he needs to be punished. Like when you make a mistake and you do something wrong, Mommy gives you time out. Well, that's what's happening to Daddy. But I kept telling him the whole time that he loved them and he misses them. And there was no communication other than writing. So he wrote letters from the county jail, and I would read him some portions of the letters because his letters were filled with how much he loved his children and how much better life was going to be, which was not true. But at the time, I know he meant it, and I really tried to believe it.
Over the years, Barbara has participated in speaking engagements, phone support, facilitating PFA support meetings, and advocacy.
So I work with 2 reentry task forces, one in Nassau, one in Suffolk. I'm on the Suffolk County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. I work with youngsters. We're doing a program with high school students who have some family member incarcerated. Of course, most of them is their parent, express themselves through writing. And I work with the Safe Parole Act and speak to legislators, trying to make this system a little bit more human and to end the mass incarceration if we can. We're working with the Raise the Age project so that children 16 and 17 are not automatically put into the adult criminal justice system if they commit a crime. There are only 2 states that do that, North Carolina and New York. So we work with anything that has to do with criminal justice.
Barbara and PFA's efforts have been recognized throughout Long Island, and their mission of providing support continues.
So with Prison Families Anonymous now, what are your primary focuses and goals to achieve within your meetings?
To help people navigate the system, for them to have a voice and a place to vent what they're going through, to people who understand. If they want to cry, they can cry. If they want to scream, if they want to curse, I try to avoid that, but some of them do. But navigating the system is an important part, but also advocacy. I think we have a vested interest in what's happening in the criminal justice system, and if we don't care, who will?